Good afternoon. This is Jan Smith. I'm the current chair of the J&K Platt Environmental Land Acquisition and Protection Program. This is our general committee meeting for October 5th, 2020. Now, if for any reason I am looking at the screen and missing the hands up, please call me on it. So I make sure I'm going to try to watch the screen and the hands and make my notes. So I wish us all well with this today. And thank you all for being here. We have a very sad situation. One of our long-term members, Kent Bailey, passed away last week. And I would like for any of you who would like to say something about Kent to please do so. He's going to be missed. He was a very knowledgeable man, and he was really interested in getting the Cone Ranch and helpful to us always, and always had good information to impart to the rest of us. So who would like to speak about Kent? Joe, I see your hand. I'm getting a lot of static. Is everybody else getting static?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, Sally, you were the first one to send something around about Kent. Do you or Ann wish to speak about him or the representative?
I just want to say that, you know, he was always very knowledgeable, as you said, and friendly and participated, and seemed to be pretty rational and sane and interested. And it was just a shock when, I mean, it's always a shock, but it happened so suddenly. I, you know, wish the best to him and his family. I know it's going to be hard to follow him. He was very, very involved in Sierra Club. And I'm just very sad. It's just very sad when something like that happens.
Yeah.
So
unexpected. Who else would like to say something? Anyone else? Michael?
I just wanted to say he was one of my best friends, and I always tried to work with him, support him, do stuff for him, try to bridge some things that maybe I was involved in that he wasn't. And it just happened so suddenly. I talked to him every day practically, and did a lot of stuff with him. I sailed with him. You know, we were down the Caribbean together. Anyway, you know, it just really is a shame. He was involved in so many projects. As a sailor in Rocky, probably would be taking over the Sierra Club, you know, now. And I also wanted to say, if we could do something in memory of him, you know, he was so involved for so long in the environmental space here in Hillsborough County and Florida, that if there would be an opportunity, maybe at one of the parks or some other place to do something where we could put together a little bit of a memorial for him, I think that'd be terrific. Or maybe there's a trail, I don't know. You can have all the big ideas, but I really miss him. I appreciate all the things that he tried to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, we can have some people talk about, we can put a little committee together and decide if there's something we would like to recommend to the board. It'll have to go to the Board of County Commissioners. Right. Since he was so interested in the Cone Ranch, there might be something out there. And Paul, I saw your hand up.
I just wanted to express, you know, sympathy again to his family and to all of his friends. We all are going to miss his involvement and his passion for protecting our natural world. And I think it's kind of a lesson to all of us. You know, life is short. We're fortunate to still be in it. And we just need to do the best we can, as much as we can, while we can. So I would just like to encourage us all to, you know, sort of in his memory, carry on the best we can.
Yeah. Thank you, Ann. Are there any other comments to be made, or shall we move on with the agenda?
I would just like to second he was very persistent, but his heart was in the right direction, and I was very gratified to know him. Thank you.
I'm wondering if some of the people that are speaking could mute their pictures or whatever. Maybe that's the extra noise we're getting.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Okay. Well, sounds better already. So, is there anybody who would like to serve on a committee just to talk about Kent and make a recommendation, or do you want to ask the Board of County Commissioners if they would consider naming a trail or something, perhaps at Cone Ranch, because he was so ecstatic over getting that parcel? What do we do, Forrest or Ross? Uh-oh.
So Jan, we can, take some ideas from a committee, take them to the board. We could also work directly with you, Sally, and I saw Rocky's hand up, and maybe Rocky as well, and but look for some options that may be out there, perhaps a special place for him. And
Michael, I think Michael.
Too many people talking at once.
Sorry.
Forrest, finish, please.
I was going to say, maybe just kind of work it internally to come up with some different options before we go to the Board of County Commissioners. I don't know that it necessarily rises to the subcommittee level, but maybe just give Ross and I some ideas of what could be presented.
Okay, Sally?
I just wanted to suggest that Michael, since they were such good friends and worked together, would be the natural to be leading that effort. Michael, where are you?
Well, Forrest, why don't you come forward? Maybe we have our annual meeting in March. Forrest, maybe in March you could come forward with some ideas on something regarding Kent and his memory, and maybe a special trail at Cone Ranch or whatever and you could work with, let me see, I have to think about the sunshine law. So maybe it'd be best if you just came up with some proposals and bring them to the next general meeting. And you can individually talk to anybody on the general committee.
Absolutely. Yep, we can do that.
Okay, is that okay with everyone? Nod your heads. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. I did put the Theodore Roosevelt Award on the agenda because it was certainly a different way of handling the award and recognizing Governor Martinez, who was very gracious that day. It was good to see him, but on my screen, I lost him. The only person I could see Jack Berlin, and I could see Joe, but I lost Governor Martinez for some reason. And I thought that since Joe was asked to speak at his award ceremony, maybe Joe would like to say something, but first I would like to say that when things, if they ever get back to normal, it would be nice if we could invite Governor Martinez to a meeting and get a picture with him, because I've always taken pictures of the people who have received the award, and it's part of our history. I know it's the county commission's award, but we work hard to make sure that they have the right person to give the award to. So, Joe, what do you do? You all think that's a good idea? It may be a year before we can do it, but it would be, I think, something we should do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Joe, do you want to say anything about the award ceremony?
You caught me off guard. I thought it was very nice. I didn't see him as well, but I know he was very pleased. I saw him later in the week. He was very pleased with it. I think we have some people who are not muted.
Sally, I think you're open again. Can you mute? Okay.
But what I wanted to just bring up what I said in my, where's thanks to Forrest, we had the information, and of the 62,000 acres that ELAPP has bought, or roughly approximately 53% were bought through the state programs, which Governor Martinez initiated, Preservation 2000 and Florida Forever. So, I mean, he was, I think, a very worthy winner. And I think it was nice to give it to somebody like that who had such a big impact. It's also nice to go back before, people who are in the trenches too, that y'all done, other than giving it to me, y'all have been very good in giving it to worthy people. And it was a very nice award. And I know he greatly appreciated it. So I don't know if you want anything else from me, but.
No, thank you. Thank you. We will, I assume, get the notices out again sometime in November, Forrest, for the next nomination for the Theodore Roosevelt Hillsborough Forever Award.
That's correct, November.
Okay, thanks. So then we'll need our committee back together in the early spring. I guess we're now down to agenda item number 4, City of Tampa presentation. So, City of Tampa people, as you speak, would you identify yourself, because some of these little blocks don't have your name on it, and maybe some do. But they're here to present a proposal regarding the South McDill 48 ELAPP site, a stormwater proposal. So we're ready for them.
And can I ask a quick question? This is Sally Thompson.
Sure.
Could you tell me when you make the presentation, why the slide that says South McDill 48 calls it a former ELAPP property? I just in the presentation, that just jumped at me because it's still ELAPP as far as I know.
Forrest, you gotta,
Hey, Jan.
yeah.
This is Forrest. We might want to go ahead and take public comment right now, because I believe all the public comment is related to this project.
Yes.
And so typically we do that prior to the presentation.
We do. Well, that's different than the way I've done it up before, I think. So, yes, but I wanted to hear, before we debate it, I wanted to hear from the city, then hear from our staff, then let the board ask questions, and then have public comment. I don't know, are the people from the city not all here right now? Forrest, you're muted.
It looks like everyone's here, Jan. So yeah, however you want to do it is fine. I just wanted to make sure that that you remembered that there were folks wanting to speak, members of
Yes,
the public.
I do have it. I just thought that if the city could make their presentation, we should hear from you. I think that might make some of us come up with questions or concerns. And then after that, then we can have the public come forward and speak to it. If that is agreeable with everyone, that's the way I would like to handle this.
I'm fine with that. That's great.
Okay. Okay, so could this city person, are they going to be able to show us pictures?
No, I wouldn't think that it's going to be that.
So, Jan,
Yes.
this is Tom Rees. The
Yeah.
city is welcome to speak if they want to say something, but I was going to go ahead and do the presentation on this project, and I can share my screen.
Okay, that'd be good.
All right, let's see if this works. Can you see the screen?
Yes, it's black. Now it's in color. Wonderful.
I can put the request in. If you could reply back with a picture, then it's going to be, and then that's going to be helpful. Because I have a feeling that it has to do with, something at the end, or maybe this coupler.
Can everybody please mute themselves if they're not speaking? We're listening to somebody's conversation right now.
Then we'll better be able
Karen, can you mute yourself, please?
prepared.
Jan, you can also mute her.
Yes, I can. Is she muted now? Okay, so Tom, you're going to make the presentation?
Yeah, and the city can speak if they'd like to at the end, but I was set up to go ahead and do the presentation because I have the most information on the site itself and this project. So I was trying to go through this PowerPoint.
Yep.
So everybody can see the screen, correct?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Everybody? Yeah.
All right, so I'll start then. Again, my name is Tom Reese. I'm with Environmental Science
Nicole's on the
Associates.
email too. Yep, she'll receive it too.
Somebody's still talking.
Okay.
That's Karen again, Miss Jan.
Yep.
No. Okay, Tom.
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to talk about the Lower Peninsula Stormwater Improvements Project,
We
and
don't have-
specifically the McDill 48 parcel. So let's just launch right into it. If I can get this to move.
Oh, yeah, I don't have access.
All right, this is the Inner Bay Peninsula. It's bordered to the south by McDill Air Force Base,
Okay.
and this area
Thanks
that's
so much.
outlined in yellow
Bye.
is considered the Lower Peninsula Watershed Plan. So in 2018, the City of Tampa and the Southwest Florida Water Management District collaborated on looking at this area, mostly from the city's perspective from a flooding concern. There's a lot of flooding in this area here. And from the water management districts, they're interested in water quality improvements to the receiving water bodies, specifically Hillsborough Bay and Old Tampa Bay, and look at what can be done out here. Now you can see this area is outlined in yellow. The blue on here, it represents the 100-year floodplain, or flood map, sorry, the 100-year flooding that can occur out here. Now, so don't let that name fool you. If we had a 100-year flood event this year, you don't have 99 years of nothing. This is just a frequency that they think these storms are happening. What we're seeing here lately is the atmospheric ability to deliver massive amounts of rainwater has dramatically increased in the last few decades. So these 100-year events are happening way more frequent than they did historically. And what you can see in this imagery, of course, is a lot of blue, which means there's a lot of areas that would get flooded if we had that kind of event. So in this study area, you'll see these subbasins, and every one of those was looked at with the eye of what can be done to improve flooding, improve water quality, and how can that be done for the most effective cost. So these areas were looked at, and what rose to the top are these two areas, kind of the central south, the blue and the green. These two areas here, you could do the most improvements to water quality, flood attenuation. I'm not sure if that was a question, but I'll keep going until somebody
Yes.
tells me to stop.
You're going to go all the way through your presentation before we have any questions, please.
Okay. Well, those two color areas, we can get the most benefit for the cost as far. So that was prioritized as the first one. So let's zoom into that area right now. And here it is kind of zoomed in. The first thing you see on here is these black lines. That's the main trunk system, the stormwater drainage system to this area. It all comes kind of from the north. It comes into this property known as McDill 48. And then it ultimately goes out on the east side and goes out to Hillsborough Bay. And in here, there's an underground drainage system that kind of conveys the water from point A to point B. What else is you can see on this map besides the 100-year flooding limits are these red line properties. And these red line properties are properties that structurally have been flooded. So these buildings, whether they're homes or shops or whatever it is, they have reports of flooding during, big storm events. And the green stars are areas where there's been reports of flooding in the streets. So your house might not be flooded, but you can't get to your house because your street's flooded. So you can see pretty quickly that there is a lot of issues in this portion of the peninsula where there's flooding. And so with that in mind, the city has been trying to figure out ways how to address all this flooding. And so I'm going to go to the next slide here and just take a look at the big picture. When you look at this picture here, the first thing you see is that the McDill 48 parcel right here is an oasis surrounded by development. I mean, there's nothing that hasn't been pretty much developed out here or put into a stormwater pond or McDill Air Force Base. It's all been built out. And so if you are the city trying to figure out where am I going to do some sort of flood relief and water quality improvements, you know, this site from the engineer's point of view jumps out and says, hey, this could be, the site could be, have some solutions into it. Now, also I want to tell you that this site, almost everything in here that was built before 1984. And what's significant about 84 is that's when the stormwater rules came in. So in 85, if you built a shopping center or a lot of impervious area, you had to treat that. You had to treat your water, and you had to attenuate or hold water on your site before it went downstream and flooded your neighbor's property. But almost none of what was built out here was built after 84. It was all built before. So all this runoff goes directly into the receiving water bodies, mostly on this side, into Hillsborough Bay, unabated and untreated, just go straight into the bay. And so that is an issue, and it's unfortunate, but that's the way it was done. And so it's a problem, and has been a problem for a while. So let's take a look at this property. So in 1992, ELAPP, it's one of the first purchases that was actually in the city limit, bought this property. It's 48 acres, that's hence the name, 48 acres, and you can see why they bought it, right? It wasn't developed. And it wasn't developed because it had that big low spot in the middle, and it was easier properties around it to develop. And luckily by 92, there was a program, ELAPP, and purchasing this property was a good thing to do to preserve it. Like I said, it was one of the first purchases by ELAPP for a city of Tampa property. It is made up of some oaks, beautiful oak hammocks and portions of it, pine flatwoods, and a wetland. So from that period on, in 92, 8 years later, after it was purchased, the city commissioned a study on the property. And it was a park management plan, and this was in the year 2000. It was a pretty thick plan. It's 127 pages, pretty thorough. And they talked about the habitats that are on there. There's some really good pine flatwoods, oak hammocks out there. They noted heavily the drained wetland in the center, and they attributed that drainage and the poor health of that wetland to the 1930s era drainage system. So the site conditions also had a number of things that were surprising when I read the report. There were no federally listed species found during their study, although there were state listed species like gopher tortoises. They found 21 species of exotic vegetation. They identified 10 to 15 acres of highly disturbed habitat within the 48 acres. And that represents about 30% of the property, of which 2 to 3 acres they mapped as monospecific Brazilian pepper. And so the recommendations had a lot of recommendations, but their main one was reduce the biomass. There's a lot of dead vegetation out there. The site hadn't been burned in years. They prescribed burn was a recommendation for the pine flatwoods. They also talked about rehydrating the hydric hammock, as they called that central wetland area, and treat the exotics on site. And so these were the recommendations they had on here. And so that was a good recommendation, and the city took it to heart. So about 3 years later, again, the city wanted to have a little bit more control. This is in their property. They're responsible for doing things, and yet it was an ELAPP property. So they went to FCT, Florida Community Trust, for a grant to actually take over this property and make it a city property. And they were using funding from FCT to do that. So FCT agreed to and made a formal agreement with the city of Tampa, and it recognized the restrictions that ELAPP had on this property in the first place, which was conserve open areas and the various habitat types, and that this was supposed to be a passive, nature-based recreation park, not ball fields, parking lots. It's supposed to be a passive, nature-based treatment area or park. But they also added a number of additional obligations that the city was supposed to do as part of this agreement. Number one, they said to work directly with the Southwest Florida Water Management District to implement a plan to fix that culvert and drainage system on site because it was dewatering the wetland, and thus rehydrate that central wetland, improve water quality entering into Hillsborough Bay. They actually wanted the water quality leaving the site, instead of just being piped straight out to the bay, to have improved water quality to the receiving water body. And of course, enhanced habitat for the gopher tortoises, and again, the bike trail, which was supposed to be put on there in the first place, or pedestrian trail. And they have a provision that FCT, of course, approves the activities out here, and so that they meet these requirements and that they try to protect the trees on site as much as possible. So you go forward another 15 years, and what happens to the site is getting more and more overgrown. All that has happened to it pretty much was a fence put around it. There was entrance points. So a lot of homeless people started using the site, and vagrants, and bringing a lot of trash inside. It started getting not deadly, dangerous to be on site because it's so overgrown. There's no line of sight. There are people out there that are homeless. So some of the neighborhood groups complained and cleaned up some of the trash. And finally, this year, the city of Tampa went in there and removed a lot of the trash with the sheriff's office or the police department, got the vagrants out, and they locked the fence, literally closed it off to the public because they couldn't control what was going on in there. So that brings us up pretty much to today. So now let's talk about what the city of Tampa stormwater folks were doing. They were trying to get this project done to address the flooding that we talked about in the beginning and improve water quality. So they put out an RFP for a design build team to come in and come up with a design to address the issues that they have, which is flooding, and improve water quality, which Swiftmud wants done, and to adhere to the FCT requirements that were added to this property when the city got control of it. So a number of firms bid on this. The Kimmins-Atkins team was selected to do this work. They were selected because they have relevant experience doing this type of work. And they, in their presentation, were very sensitive to the site. They weren't going to be putting in a rectangular stormwater pond with chain link fence all around it and slap it right somewhere in the middle of the site. They understood that this site was a former ELAPP site, purchased by ELAPP, and is still a public property now that the city is controlling, that we should be doing something that's going to be working with the site and not destroy the property just to take care of these other issues with flooding. So we, as in ESA, was brought into this project. And that's because I've been lucky in my career of 35 years in this area to do habitat restoration projects. For those of you that know me or those that don't, I've had a long career of doing habitat restoration projects and trying to really work so these projects and public spaces are open to the public, as well as protect the habitat values on here. Now, I don't think any of you, except for a handful of you, have been on site. I know the city parks has, and some folks from ELAPP. And so let's show you some photos of what this site really looks like today. Like I said, there's gopher tortoises out there, active burrows on here. Even though it's heavily overgrown, they're still making it. There's very nice pockets of saw palmetto prairie out there, and they're in good shape. And so even though they haven't been burned in a while, they still are doing well. And there are very large oak trees out here. You can see this person standing in this picture to show you the scale of these trees. Although these don't meet the city standards of a grand tree, they are huge trees out here, and they tend to be clumped in pods or clusters. And there's smaller trees everywhere, but these big trees are out there, and that's why this property was protected, right, for these type of habitats. But not everything is in good shape after all these years out here. And so if you look at some other photos in here, you can see there's a lot of trees in here, and there's a lot of dead branches and biomass accumulating. The saw palmetto is 7 feet tall. It's hard to cruise through the site anymore. And I can say right now, if this was April and we had a lightning strike, that would be a big deal. This would be likely a catastrophic burn that would kill almost all the oak trees out there. The pine trees and saw palmetto could handle it, but those oaks couldn't handle a catastrophic fire. And plus, there's no fire lanes in here. There is no access for a fire brush truck to come in here and try and fight a fire. So the surrounding homes would be at risk. So this site needs help, okay? It's been neglected for a long time, and that's reality. There's limited funding on either side, ELAPP or the City Parks Department. And so it's just needs some help. And I'll just show you some more photos. Even though a lot of trash was removed, there's still trash around the site, especially along the perimeter. This stuff should be taken out. The small isolated wetland, which is in the southeast corner, that wasn't actually noted too much in the old report, is actually in pretty good shape. There is a lot of non-native and nuisance grasses in here, but hydrologically, it's functioning. We were out here last, there was about 2 feet almost of water in this wetland. There's all kinds of amphibians living here. It's really functional, except it just needs some help with the vegetation. And then in the underbrush of these oak trees, there's a lot of non-native ferns that have been encroached. Also, as it was noted earlier, there's 2 big canal systems that were built way before this was purchased for preservation, and they both come together into the site, and they form then this underground drainage system. This was taken just a few weeks ago when we had some rain, and there's actually water in it, but it's about 2 feet to 2.5 feet below the ground. And it's very effective for removing the water from that central wetland. And that just then flows directly out to the bay. So that's some of the conditions on the site. I have a few extra photos here where you can see the, air potato covering a lot of debris out here. The biggest thing, I think, is the Brazilian pepper. It's getting worse and worse out there. In addition to some of the mapping I'll show you, you can see how thick the Brazilian pepper is starting to be. And on the left-hand side is a perimeter walkway, and it's like a tunnel. That's all Brazilian pepper. And it's a shame because this site has such beautiful habitat, but it's being overrun by vines, exotic vegetation. And if somebody doesn't do something soon, we're going to lose the reason it was purchased in the first place. And so that's what the site looks like today. I don't want to paint a picture that it's all bad, but I'm going to tell you that a lot of it, and according to 20 years ago, the report said that, 30 acres out of the 48 are in good shape and 15 are not good. And it hasn't gotten better in the last 20 years. In fact, obviously it's got worse. So we were brought in and we work closely with the Atkins-Kimmins team, but we're working directly for Kimmins on here to come up with a plan. How can this site be used or improved on, not only for its ecological benefits, but for the benefits of the flooding concerns and water quality improvement going to Hillsborough Bay? So the first thing we do is look at historic imagery. The top picture up here is 1938. You can see that the vegetation in the middle here, that represents the lower portions of the property, but mostly was a pine flatwood area and not too vegetated with a lot of oak trees because it's a fire-dominated community. And if you look at the imagery over time, it's definitely changed. We also looked at all the data layers that are out there, National Wetland Inventory, National Soil Conservation Service, Florida Native Area Inventory for what kind of species are out there. But we relied heavily on that McDill 48 report. And I'd like to read here real quickly a quote of what they described this site back in 2000. The hydric area on the McDill property has had a constructed drainage system attached to it for almost 75 years. Due to the lack of regular inundation, the dried, stressed hydric system would most likely not be characterized as a jurisdictional wetland in its present state. That was 20 years ago, and it hasn't gotten any better. It's still being drained, and in fact, now there are more nuisance species encroaching onto the site. I'll further quote from their report what they thought should be done with this system. And under the proposed improvement section, they wrote, hydric area in the center of the site is presently stressed due to the lack of hydration. It is proposed to replace a weir structure to hold stormwater in the wetland area for rewatering of the area. So even 20 years ago, they could see that there's an issue at this wetland, and it was due to the drainage of this site. So to further really know this site, you need to go out there. I spent 5 days out there trudging through, and I wish it was like in 1938. I probably could have done it in a day, but it's like this lower picture. Even though it's native vegetation, it's very heavy, hard to move around out here. It took days to really see it, but I think I've seen about 95% of the site. And when we were out here, this is what you start doing. You can create maps. We're GPSing the habitat types we saw. So the left photo here in purple are the monospecific areas of Brazilian pepper. You can see them. That doesn't map everything. There's Brazilian pepper along this eastern property. There's some along the southern boundary, but the monospecific large areas of pepper are delineated. So further on, if you go to this image to the right, these green circles are oak clusters. These are not individual trees. You can tell by their size. These are sizes of warehouses. These are big clusters of very nice and healthy looking, both live and laurel oak trees. You can see it all throughout the site. The eastern, southeast corner is so thick with trees, we just delineated the outside edge. It wasn't worth trying to do polygons because it was solid forest of nice trees. And so as you do this, you start getting a feel for the site. Not that there's not trees in between, there are individual trees here, but the big, massive oak trees and the healthy habitat are starting to be delineated with this field work with our differential GPS. The next set of slides shows further mapping. First of all, the two blue areas are the two wetlands. This small one is the isolated one that's actually functioning hydraulically today, although it needs some help with some vegetation control. And then the central one that has been drained for probably 70 years is in the center area here. And if you were walking through the woods, you would never know there's a wetland there unless you're looking for it, because there's no water standing there, even in the wet season. There's no staining on the trees of flooding area. It's just the species of the trees change. Now you have some trees like dogwood and other bay trees that as a biologist that, hey, this is a different habitat here. So it was delineated on the trees and not because there is any functionality of the wetland, because right next to it is that drainage system and it's very effective at draining. What else is on this map are these yellow polygons. These are the saw palmetto prairies. Very nice habitat. They're still in good shape. So these were also delineated. And when you go over here to the right, these small little circles are the gopher tortoises. There are 6 active gopher tortoise burrows that we found on site. So all those were mapped. And with doing that work, this is a traditional way of trying to get some information on site. You can really start seeing the lay of the land and what you'd want to avoid and what you would like to get rid of, in this case, Brazilian pepper. One step further, working with the Atkins team, they flew high-resolution drones on here that create these 3-dimensional images. And in these images, the orange represent the tops of these big oak trees, and the kind of red, these 2 spots here, represent the highest trees on site, which are the pine trees. And so with this information, it really helps us know where to look and where to map this site. This site will have tree survey done, working with the city's arborist, but that's not completed yet. So we're working ahead of them, trying to come up with a lay of the property so we really understand it. The lower image is a LiDAR image, and that shows you elevation. So the central part here, okay, a portion of it right here is where that wetland is the lowest elevation on site. So if you're going to build a stormwater pond or do anything on site to take care of this water flooding and improve water quality, you're not going to build it here in the orange and yellows, right? Because that's up on the hill, so to speak. You're going to try and work with the grain, right? Work where it's low. So you take all this information and gather it together, and you come up with your very first habitat plan. And these are very first conceptual straw man plans, okay? This is not like this is design. This is how you start a design. So what this results in, all the habitats are drawn on here. And what happens is this pond starts to design itself, right? You don't see no square edges in here. This is not your traditional stormwater pond, as you can tell. It has a lot of bends and turns, not the most easiest thing to build, but it is buildable. And by doing that, you are preserving almost all of these big clusters of oak trees. You're preserving most of the South Prairie, saw palmetto areas, and you're going to be addressing this wetland, former wetland, non-functional wetland, and make it into a functional wetland like it was maybe 70 years ago. And you're avoiding the Gopher Tortoise areas. The dark blue would be the open water component. The lighter blue would be the littoral shelves where we get the water quality treatment if water is coming in here. This is a way of improving the water quality before it exits to the east and out to Hillsborough Bay. And so this is the very, very first design. You can see there's 2 lobes, and they're separated by a connection point here, so they can address water coming in from the different sides that have the flooding concerns. Now, we work closely with the City Parks Department. This is not done in a vacuum. Working with their biologists, talking about how we're trying to avoid and preserve the pristine habitats on here and how we can improve the remaining habitat, and also working with Hillsborough County. And as time goes on, we have a trail system. We can put a trail system on here. There's supposed to be one on here from the beginning. The layout of the trail, we would like the public involvement on here. We'd like public involvement with the entire thing, which we will get to when we have our first public meeting. But for us, we want to get to you guys, ELAPP. This is a property that was purchased by ELAPP money many, many years ago. And so we want to show you that if we're going to do something on site, it's going to be done in a very sensitive manner. So when we get to the public involvement, the layout of the trail and how close it should be to homes, all that is flexible. This is just a draft plan. And so as you go further in here, we went ahead and talked to the engineers and said, I know you have 2 lobes here, but we have some tree clusters here that are going to be obliterated if we keep this design. Can we move this to a new location? So working with the engineers, we're able to, again, redesign the plan. We still have the 2 lobes, which are important for the amount of water that's coming into these lobes. But now we are able to save this cluster, these 3 clusters of trees, and that'll be the connection point. Could be the connection point between these 2 things in 2 lobes right here. So again, working with the engineers on this is very important that was addressed. Then you can put the trail system back on here. Gets very busy. There's a lot of different ways that this trail could be laid out where we want some help from the public on that, and even on the design where we can still refine it further to avoid trees. And so this is what was sent out. This is pretty much the PowerPoint that was sent out a couple of weeks ago, but there's been more work going on since then. I want to show you this next slide here to shut off all the noise, we'll call it, although it's important because it drives our design, but just so you can not be so busy, this is the pond. This irregular shaped pond avoids all the mapped oak clusters that we've mapped on site. It preserves most of the palmetto prairie on both sides here. It provides all the gopher tortoise habitat. It isolates and keeps this isolated pond isolated. It's going to incorporate and improve and rehydrate this wetland system, and the trail system can be moved in any way. But this just shows you the intent. 70% of the property to be left intact, and better than that, improved upon by removing the biomass, improve the habitats. And the 30% or the 15 acres could be used then to address the flooding and the water quality interests that FCT is required of the city to do. Now, even since this was sent out, there's a newer version. Working with the city's stormwater engineers, they further refined it again. This shows you the simplicity of this design. This is not set in stone. These are how we go forward. That's why it's called a conceptual design. They had a good idea to put a lobe over here so we could pull this side in and protect this last cluster that was the only one that was left that was being impacted by the design. Now all of them are saved. And this area here that's hatched, that's not necessarily being dug out. This is the natural 9-foot contour. Depending on what kind of feedback we get with working with the agencies and regulatory agencies, the public, the Parks Department, ELAPP, this area could, if it's designed right, could get wet for a few days as the thing drains down after a big rain without hurting any of these trees. And that would provide just a little bit more storage, a little bit less flooding upstream in the area. So again, this is a work in progress. This is conceptual design by name for a main reason, because it's early on in a conceptual. We haven't had the public involvement. You are the first folks to really get to see this, especially this version here, of a plan. I only have a couple of slides left, and so I'd like to go to those, because a good question from me, if I was watching this, is, well, that's great and dandy, but look how many years this thing sat and it really didn't get anything done, and who's going to really maintain these things? And that's a great question. And so that has been addressed. This contract with Timmins would be doing the whatever design we come up with that's the most ecologically sensitive, and it'll be something along the lines of what we're starting out with here. And then there are all the ecological improvements that we talked about and that was recommended 20 years ago would be done to the entire site. Okay, and there would be funding set aside for post-maintenance so that it stays that way. And so I threw this picture in here because what is this site? What could this site look like? Well, I did a project down in Ruskin, and that project is called the Lost River Preserve. Very similar to this, a lot of oak trees on site. We carefully designed around the hammocks and put in this freshwater system. Now, this system has very big 50 to 60 foot wide littoral shelves. We couldn't do this on the McDill 48 without taking out more trees. So we're going to have a lot narrower littoral shelf on here, but you can get the picture here. This is 1 year after this was installed. All native plants in here. You can see the trees have been protected. And then the next picture, the last slide I have, this is 9 years later with no maintenance. ELAPP has not had funding to do in here. They're going to come in here in 2021 here at the end of this year and take care of some exotics that are trying to come in the uplands on the property boundaries, but no maintenance. And you can see we still have the character of the freshwater pond. All the oaks are still here. This doesn't have a trail system, but this is what the property could look like if it's designed right and working with the grain. So the objectives of this project will be enhance and protect the quality habitats on site. Okay, there are good quality habitats on site. The intent is to protect all of them and improve them, remove the biomass, remove the trash, and fix the site up. Flood relief and water quality improvements. It's important to the neighbors. With all the people that live around here that are flooded, this is a relief for them. For the quality of water entering Hillsborough Bay, this is going to be an improvement because now that water is going to be treated before it goes out to the bay. We want safe public access, okay? This needs to be opened up to the public, and it needs to have a passive trail system in here so there's line of sight so the police could ride through here on their bicycles and make sure things are fine and dandy. And during the day, the public can go in here and walk in and enjoy this park. And let's talk about the ecological things on here. Rehydrate this wetland, improve both wetland systems on site, improve the habitat for gopher tortoises so they have maybe more can live on site. Reduce the biomass, okay? This is a fire hazard as it sits today. There's no way to fight a fire on site, and there's so much fuel on here. It's an accident waiting to happen, and it needs to be addressed. It's been 20 years, it's time. Trash removal. And the last thing is, this should be a neighborhood amenity. This should be for the neighbors to have a great park so they can walk through here and enjoy it safely. And so with that, I'm going to go back to this picture here. This is, like I said, 9 years later, Lost River Preserve. And you can see what it looks like today. And I will end with that and take any questions if you have any.
Tom, what I'd like to do is have our staff respond to the presentation. And then I think members of the general committee are going to have questions for you and for the staff. And after that's all done, then I want to hear from the public. I know that there is one person there that wants to speak. There may be more. So is Forrest, didn't you do a study on this property when you were working on a degree?
I did. I wrote my master's thesis on this property, looking primarily at the effects of habitat fragmentation. And of course, that included things like exotic plant invasion, to a certain degree, illegal dumping, lack of fire. Again, this was back in the mid-90s when I did that thesis, I think around 95 or 96. Also looked at the dehydration of the wetland soils throughout the center of the property, did an extensive soil study, multiple locations. And so suffice to say that, even back in the mid-90s, this site was severely impacted, by the surrounding development. And I would say not even so much by the development, but just the lack of fire and the lack of natural ecosystem processes that you typically see in a larger preserve. In this case, with it only being 48 acres surrounded by a variety of residential, commercial development, the internal ecological processes of this site are really controlled by the external factors of the surrounding neighborhoods and developments. So from that perspective, the fact that, it has been highly disturbed for a long time, I look at a project like this, and I will say initially, when the city came to us with this proposal about a year ago, it was less than desirable. It was a rectangular 15, 20 acre pond that was slated to be placed right in the center of the property, basically eliminating, most of the good vegetation within that central 15 to 20 acres. So I was less than impressed with that. And I expressed that concern to the city. I think it was someone with their engineering department. And so to the city's credit, they listened to our concerns. And also, I think at that point, they realized that Florida Communities Trust had a significant role to play in this in terms of approving any type of stormwater or wetland creation project. So with that said, Atkins and the city brought on ESA and Tom to look at the design of the project so they could take it from your standard 15-acre rectangular pond with little to no habitat benefits and actually turn it into something that could work for the site. I'll be honest, I had my doubts when we first started on this, when Tom and I first started talking about a project. I just didn't really see how it could work without damaging, too much of the site. But I have to say, after, working directly with Tom for the last few months on this, and, the city willing to, make some concessions in certain areas with regard to their change in design and protecting some of the existing habitats. In fact, I'd say most of the existing habitats on site. I'm honestly very impressed with the final product that we saw today. Again, it's a work in progress, as Tom mentioned, but in terms of the design, I'll say sort of the sinuosity of the wetland system itself, the way it avoids a lot of the palmetto prairie, a lot of the grand oaks, a lot of the nice pines, and at the same time, rehydrates that central wetland system. That was one of my biggest findings back in the mid-90s, was that the old bayhead and central wetland had been just really severely dehydrated. The water table was low. You could see that a lot of the old bay trees were stressed. And I think having the opportunity to bring some water back into the site, in particular that central wetland area, and at the same time, getting some residence time and treatment of that water before it discharges directly into Hillsborough Bay, that's certainly going to provide, I think, tremendous benefits, at least locally, for storm water and water quality in that area of the bay, which is adjacent to the Inner Bay Peninsula, and then eventually wraps south around to the wetlands around MacDill Air Force Base. So I think from a habitat standpoint, water quality standpoint, and also I would say a land management standpoint. As Tom mentioned, the city has committed to exotic plant control throughout the site, which is critical, as we know, after any restoration or mitigation type project. And in fact, as I look at the design plan for the wetland, it may actually be possible now to, in very, very small increments, 3 to 5 acres, actually get a prescribed burn on part of this site. Now, granted, you would have to do some removal of, excessively high salt palmetto, areas like that. You have to do some vegetation management prior to prior to prescribed burning. But I think that this project would actually enhance the ability to manage the site long term. And so I've gone from less than impressed and less than enthusiastic.
I'm sorry, can Gene be muted? Because there's a lot of reverb.
Getting a lot of static again. Did everybody check their mic?
It's Gene. Stoudemire.
Okay, so I'll just finish up with a year ago, again, less than impressed with the quote design that was presented to the county. Again, a square rectangle, a rectangular 15-acre pond. This is significantly better, and this is something that I can support. Again, as Tom mentioned, continue to refine the design, lessen the impacts as much as possible. I think that last slide that Tom showed was very indicative of how they're working to try to limit any negative impacts to the site. But given the size of the project, I think it's down now to about 14, 15 acres. And given the location of where they're planning to place the property in terms of being able to work around a lot of the important and native upland habitats in particular, that has certainly changed my perspective over the past year. And without going on too much longer, this is something I could support. I think it'll be beneficial to the site, again, from a water quality perspective, habitat, and land management. It's, I think, a good project. And that's it.
Okay. What I'd like to do now is ask board members of the general committee, whoever has a question. I'm not seeing everybody now because I'm seeing the picture with the questions/suggestions, so I'm not exactly sure. It looks like Sally and Fred Webb have their hands up, and I did think that I saw Joel too. So Sally, would you like to ask your questions or make your comments?
Yeah, I have some comments, and I think, Tom, you can take down the picture and we can see everybody. I have to say I went through a whole spate of emotions watching this, from anger to frustration to, as somebody who's retired from the city of Tampa, who lives in the city, who's always pushed for ELAPP to support city projects, it was incredibly disappointing to see that the city hadn't done anything. I mean, I really am appalled. However, seeing the plans that Tom has presented, just like, and reflecting what Forrest was saying, I think this is great. And if there's something in the project that indicates that it's going to be maintained, I think it's really, I'm very pleased. So I went, like I said, I went from really being annoyed and angry to feeling sort of relieved. It's taken an awful long time, but you know, there's never,
We just Jean, after the general committee asks their questions and makes their comments, then it will be your turn, please. And I have, I think Fred Webb next, then Ann, and then Joel.
Yeah, Tom, I had a couple of questions for you. First of all, yeah, from a square pond, I think that's an excellent improvement from that. I was interested in the water flow through the system. You mentioned it will be treated. Now, is that, does it flow off of that section of land back out into Hillsborough Bay like the old system, or is it going to be maintained in that one spot?
It'll still flow ultimately to Hillsborough Bay, but it'll be treated before it goes to that last stretch through the pipe out. I think the city is even looking at the outfall itself, to raise the invert of that a little bit, because with sea level rise, you want to be able to have water flow out of there, not flood. So it's going to be still flowing through a pipe, but it's going to be improved.
Okay, but so you're not talking about just settlement in the main pond basin or whatever, and whatever vegetation removal might be, it's actually going to be treated by some mechanical means or something?
Right, it's going to be treated by two ways. Is residence time, is how long the water stays in this pond before it goes out. That does treatment in itself. And then the littoral shelf that's going to line the entire pond, there will be nutrient uptake from that. And then there's a sediment sump when the water comes into this pond, will take out the heavy metals and sediments that come in. So all that, which is right now going pretty much directly into the bay, is going to be improved by this pond feature itself. And then that last segment, it's back into a pipe out to the Hillsborough Bay.
I must say the shape of that particular pond with the various curves and extensions and so on will allow more vegetative treatment of that along the littoral zone. So that was very, very clever of you all. The other question I had, the poor little gopher tortoises, the 6 of them, I think you said there were, they all look to be on the south side. So I'm assuming even with that pond in there, they'll still have flow back and forth with each other, amongst each other. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good question. We want to definitely left their habitat intact. We want to improve it and thin out some of the excess biomass like we talked about. But there's 2 colonies, if you want to call it, out there, the western one and the eastern one. And since there's going to be a space between the isolated wetland and the new pond, they can move between those 2 colonies in that narrow land bridge, but they can do it if they're not going to be completely separated.
And I'm going to ask a number 3 question concerning that, if I may. I didn't get the acreage on this total area. What I'm wondering is, you mentioned maybe they'll reproduce and add more gopher tortoises, but what would a site that size, what would they adequately be able to maintain as far as the population?
Well, I'm not sure what, if they reproduce or whatever. Right now, I'm just shocked how they're alive at all. It's so thick in there. It's just amazing to me, just the tenacity of life. But if we can, clean this site up, there's more foraging area for them. And so, yes, they could hold more animals on site. It's not just what the book says or what FWC says, what the carrying capacity is. It's what they can actually handle. And so by improving the habitats around those areas that we're leaving alone, I think it'll improve the habitat for the gopher tortoises.
Okay. Well, again, that looks great. So well done. Thanks.
Thank you, Fred. Ann, would you like to be?
I just want to say that this plan reflects what we always expect from Tom Reese, and which is very thoughtful, innovative design that looks at what are the resources, what are the soils, what's the current vegetation, and how do we keep as much of it on site while making real improvements. So thank you, Tom. Thank you for doing a good job. I had 2 questions though. Will there be a water goat or something before the water there's a site in order to keep trash from floating in. And do you know anything about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the engineers were very adamant that they want a trash collector before the stuff comes into this pond. We don't want this full of trash, right? As much as we don't want it in the bay, we don't even want it in this pond on this preserve. So there are designs featured that will take out the trash. And in addition, that early slide where I showed where the water's coming from the south, where the flooding issue is, they're doing some bioswales and some other improvements along the route before it even gets here to start cleaning up the water before it gets here, and keep the trash out. And they're going to have something at the entrance, as you suggested, to grab that stuff, and that way it can be picked up before it goes into the pond and ultimately potentially out to the Hillsborough Bay.
Okay, and the other thing is, I'm always, beating the bushes about littoral zones and that shallow wetland edges that are so important for wading birds. So as much as you can make that happen while still providing the stormwater needs, I think that's really important. I'm so disappointed driving around our part of the state to see so many of these stormwater ponds that are mowed, grassed down right to the edge, and then they're deep. So there's no wading bird opportunity at all in them. And so this looks very much better. And I just wanted to say, Forrest, thank you so much for holding their feet to the fire and making them come back with a really good proposal. Good job on you. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Ann. Joel, did you have comments to make?
Yes, I did. This was my project when I nominated it in the late 1980s. I left the city in '93, and I lost a lot of sleep after that because I felt as though that the city was not following through on what we had all had envisioned at that time. I had very high hopes for this site, and I was devastated by the lack of attention to it. And I certainly agree very much with Tom, and I can't think of anybody that has that this park is in better hands than anybody but Tom. And I've worked with Tom in the past. I think he's wonderful, and I'm as thrilled with this project the way I see it now being presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Joe Guidry? You need to unmute.
I just want to know, how much is the cost of this project?
I really don't know that, but I think there's folks on here from the city stormwater department that can answer that better than I can.
But we are confident, it looks like a great project, but we're confident that they will be held accountable to do what they say, to continue to monitor it and maintain it as they plan to do.
Joe, I believe so. They understand that this project does need this help, and the opportunity to do all these things out here. They are talking about funding sources to take care of the long-term maintenance. But if it's designed right and planned it tightly, like this last photo I had showed, you don't need a lot of maintenance. It's surprising. But the point is, somebody has to be overlooking it and taking care of it for the long run. So it's a very good point.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you, Joe. Al, are you with the city?
Yes, I am the stormwater chief engineer.
Can you answer Joe's question about cost?
Our current estimate is somewhere between 27 and 30 million.
Ooh.
And we are applying for co-funding from SwiftMud and for 50% of that. So we believe with the water quality treatment components that their board will support this project, and we are very confident that we will receive 50% reimbursement / co-funding from the district.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the general committee who would like to ask a question or make a comment? One comment I would make is that I would like to know specifically what are the responsibilities that the city is going to take over? I'm very concerned about burning. When I see the density around that property, I know it's going to be a very difficult burn. Is the city going to handle the burns, or is ELAPP? So my question is just, I would like two separate responses. I want to know when the project is done, who is responsible for what? What is ELAPP and Hillsborough County's responsibility, and what is the city's responsibility? And that may be something you have to get back to us at a later date.
Right, I'll say that Al might be able to answer that now.
Okay.
If not, it should, that's a good question. And I'm just not in a position to answer it, but I think between Al and the city, they can respond to that.
Okay, I think it would be helpful for ELAPP and Hillsborough County to know both of those. Al, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I did not know that there would be any maintenance from any other organization other than the city. That's new input for me. The Stormwater Engineering, we will maintain the water and below the water for in the future. If the pond needs to be dredged, we're committed to dredging any muck that would impede percolation. And the Parks Department will be maintaining the surface amenities. And it's a good question about wildlife, and I can't answer that. And I don't have any knowledge of what that requires, but please let me talk with people about that and perhaps get back with you.
Okay, the issue with the burn is Hillsborough County, ELAPP, are burning before anything is done, or is that going to be done piecemeal during the project?
So Jan, this is Forrest. The city owns and is responsible for the management and the maintenance of the property. That includes the land management component. So that would also include prescribed burning. My recommendation to the city, if they were going to ever conduct a prescribed burn out there, would be to consult with the Division of Forestry. I believe they have a different name now. It's the Florida Forest Service. But anyway, consult with them. We could certainly help out in terms of providing advice. The one thing I think it's critical about that site, if there were ever going to be a prescribed burn, is that there be some kind of a mechanical fuel reduction. In other words, get out there with heavy equipment like a hydro axe or a roller chopper, which is what we do on a lot of our ELAPP sites that over decades, perhaps prior to us acquiring them, were excluded from fire for decades. We'll go in there with mechanical equipment, clear down a certain area, not to the point to where we're stripping the property of vegetation, but utilizing standard land management techniques like roller chopping, hydroaxing. After a month or two, we let the vegetation dry out. After it's been cut, we do a prescribed burn, and the results can actually be pretty amazing. After about 3 to 4 weeks, we get grasses coming back, wildflowers, shrubs, things that where the seed source is still in the soil, and you haven't seen some of those species in decades. So that would be my recommendation to the city, since they are responsible for the management of the property, is to get with the Florida Forest Service. We can also consult with them because we burn almost 10,000 acres a year under the ELAPP program, and work together to come up with some kind of a plan. Again, you're talking about very, very small increments of burning, 2, 3, 4 acres at a time, with the mechanical treatment and control of vegetation along with it.
Thank you. So Tom, this would all need to be done before you all started with your proposed redesign and implementation of this?
Actually, it could be done at the same time. You know, if you're going to be going in here to try and create this freshwater wetland component, you have equipment, you can get rid of some of the biomass then. We will help the city come up with a plan so that all these things that we talked about can be addressed. Right? The trash removed, the biomass reduced, everything a one-time activity, and then after that, it's a maintenance activity. In other words, we don't want to disturb the site multiple times. We might as well have Kimmons come in. They're really good at this sort of stuff. They can create the pond and then also work on trying to get rid of the biomass so that we don't have a catastrophic fire.
Okay, thank you. I'm just thinking about the neighbors and burning and smoke, and I know ELAPP does a marvelous job on our prescribed burns, so I'm sure Forrest, if the city would like to have any help in calling. Sally, you have another comment? Put your unmute. You're muted there.
I see Brad Suter here, and I believe he's from the Parks Department. Does he have any comments to make?
I do. Thank you and welcome, and good to see you all again. To answer your question about the prescribed burn, it would be a collaboration effort, as Forrest indicated, with Tom Reese, and what mechanical clearing and fuel reduction that would happen as part of some of the rehabilitation of the site. We would coordinate, as we have in the past, with what was formerly Division of Forestry on the state level to write the prescription. This is an incredibly difficult prescription to do, in what size unit for the burn itself would be critical for the safety of residents and smoke and MacDill Air Force Base and everything else that's there. But for your assurances, yes, we would be going forward with the proper environmental management techniques that would be needed once this fuel reduction is really a little bit more under control than it is now. I applaud Tom and his efforts so far, and the project in the direction it's going on the collaborative effort that we've shown to date.
Thank you, Brad. Tom, I'm wondering this. We're all very impressed with what you've proposed. It looks like a wonderful park as you have designed it. It might just be so lovely that people want to really go in there. Do you have any place for you would, if the whole thing would be fenced, locked at sundown, and open sun up, but are you going to have a way for people, if they want to drive or ride a bicycle over, will there be space for them to leave their vehicles and to get into the site when it's completed?
The intention is not to add parking or to use any of the 48 acres for impervious area. So what the intent is, this is a neighborhood park. There is, people can come and park at the Sky View Park to the north, and they could walk in here and ride their bikes through the trail system. So we want this open to the public, as most ELAPP sites, and I would think maybe the city park sites like this, these passive parks, they probably close at night, but during the day, the trail would be open. And again, we're not trying to bring more people to the site per se, but people that the neighbors could use it, and obviously anybody that can drive to the Skyview Park, that would be, there is parking right there now.
Okay, good, thank you. If there are no other comments by members of the general committee, I'd like to open it up to public comment. Jean Strohmeyer, and then I guess Russ Kahn. Where is Jean? Did she leave the site? Did she leave us? Okay, we'll go ahead with Russ.
Hey, and forgive me if this is not if this is a little bit of a foolish question. And it was partially answered, so I'm adjusting it. The trail, as it was displayed on, and so still subject to community feedback, I want to make sure that we're not going to negatively impact the gopher tortoises if there's a lot of use, that they aren't molested or impeded in any way from continuing to grow their habitat by driving more people.
And that's a good question. We are, the trail, we want public input on it, but there's also, we are going to be sensitive to the habitat. So we're going to keep the trail away, not only from the border of the property, from people's backyards, but we're also going to try and steer it away from the gopher tortoise habitat. We don't need people in there messing with these animals. And so the intent is to design it so that it's away from the known gopher tortoise habitat, and hopefully the increased size of a foraging area that we can end up with at the end of the design.
Yeah, I think, because one of my concerns is we don't want to, have the trail on one side and then residential development on the other side where the gopher tortoises are boxed in and they don't have a good path to get a water source or to get to the other colony or anything like that.
That's a real good point, and I will make sure that we design it that way. Right now, I just put a dotted line on here because we really need public input, but the public input will be also driven by the ecological sensitivity. We're not going to put it in a bad place. I agree with you that that should be thought about when that gets laid in.
Did you have anything else, Russ?
No, you answered it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Jean, I see you're back. Jean Strohmeyer. You're muted. You're muted. Unmute. You're muted, Jean. Can I unmute her? Okay. Can we hear Jean? Okay. You have your mute on. Are you there, Jean? You're almost up.
Excuse me, Jean, if you look at the participant on the right, if you go and see the list of participants, over to the very right of there's a button to unmute by your name.
It's right under her name. Can I unmute her? No.
And you can in the participants section. You can.
I can? Let me see. Where is she? I can't see all the participants. Where
you have to scroll down.
I know it won't go.
Good afternoon. This is Glenn with Hillsborough County Communications. Let me see if I can assist. Jean, if you see on the bottom of your screen, there should be a bunch of buttons. There should be a mute and unmute button. You might be unmuted. Go ahead and click that if you see it. And I do not see Jean right now.
Wait a second. Let me see if I can. Okay. No, she should be unmuted now. Jean? Jean? Jean?
I don't even see her on the list anymore.
I think she left.
It looks like she just came back in.
Wait a minute. Jean? Okay, well, you know what we'll do? Forrest, what is the action that this committee needs to take?
No! No! Whoa! Whoa!
All right, Jean, are you on?
Hold on a minute. I have two computers and both are scrolling. I'm freaking out. I need to talk. I know how that goes.
Is anyone saying anything?
James, you might want to just give her a phone number to call in.
Please, please.
I think
Hold on.
We hear you, Gene.
Hey, Jan, I think you need to unmute.
She can do it with the space bar also.
Who is clicking? What is that? Do you all hear me now? Hello? I'm supposedly not muted.
No, you're not muted. Everybody, so you didn't hear us, but no, we can hear you, Jan.
Yeah, I can hear you, Jan.
Okay.
And the space bar does work, by the way.
Yeah.
Jan, if you can try and unmute Jean by clicking the microphone button next to her name.
Yeah, I've done that. Let me see. Where do I find her again? Is she not showing up on the screen? And if I get her back up over here, Jean, she is me. Okay. Now is she open? Jean?
She still has her mic unmuted.
Now see, I've clicked it on mine where it says to unmute her. It's green, so she should be able to speak. I feel bad about this. I know how desperately she wanted to speak to us about this. What are our options here?
You can try and give her the call and information.
I don't know. Is she still?
Can you give a minute? I'll email her the call-in information again.
Okay. Okay, well, while we wait to see if she can get in touch with us, we do need to go back and look at number 2 on our agenda, which is approval of the minutes. So has everybody had a chance to read them?
Dan, I have, and I move approval.
Okay. Who
That's
is
Jack.
that?
That was Jack.
Is there a second? And approval as written. All in favor of the motion to approve the minutes of Monday, June 15th, 2020, say aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's taken care of. Jean, have you come on yet?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, but I've been waiting for, the format of the meeting, and I really appreciate you letting everybody speak, but the format was told to us that we were going to speak first, so we had a specific amount of time scheduled, but I'm hanging in there, but I think others may have already left. I am pretty upset right now, especially with the other crash. I've got two computers here, and I don't know what, they're both flaking out at different times. So, I'm about to cry from all this that I've heard about this, because there's so much, and this is my heart, this ELAPP right here, okay? This is like my heartthrob right here, so just hear me out. And I'm not doing a speech, I'm just gonna respond to what everybody said. My name is Jean Strohmeyer, and I'm the president of the Interbay South Afghani Civic Association. I started this civic association for the sole purpose of saving this park, okay? I've been hiking and biking in there for many, many years. And Forrest, I called him a couple years ago because I found the article that nobody knew about. And I told him he was my hero, but today I'm not thinking so much. I'm very, very disappointed about that. Oh, Lord have mercy. So this ELAPP is not a site. It's not just a place. It is a beautiful, magical experience in the chaos of our city. Okay, so I go there all the time, okay? I hike and I bike, and I've brought community in there because people didn't know what it was and how beautiful it is. So it's not just a site. It's not just a place to dump water that comes from every place in South Tampa. So I'm just going to go through the issues on the proposal. And one of the main reasons they're saying this is because of flooding concerns. I'm the president of Interbase South of Gandy, and we are from Gandy to MacDill Air Force Base, from Dale Mabry to MacDill. And we have no flooding, virtually no flooding. So let me make that straight. There is no flooding in my entire footprint, other than 4 roads: Tharp, Varn, Selborne, and Maine. There's 4 roads, and they're flooding because those neighbors that live there have said they weren't flooded until the overbuilding. So I am very against this overbuilding, which is causing the flooding. So what's going on with this is they are proposing this so they can continue overbuilding in our neighborhood. That's just what our people feel about it. So that's just one action. That's just one thing. The second thing is they're saying, and I also take issue that it's not an ELAPP, that it's a former ELAPP. And Jan, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I don't know where that came from, and it's disturbing that it's not, but it is. And if Jan Platt were here, she'd be rolling in her grave to hear that. And I also appreciate Joel for being the one to nominate the site. That is, I really do appreciate that. And I agree with you that it has been neglected. This site, they are saying it's a 10 to 15 acre highly disturbed habitat. The current reason why it's disturbed is because it has been neglected by the city. The city was responsible for caring for this property and neglected it, just neglected it. And, you know, it's not saying that it's this current administration, but it was neglected. We all acknowledge that. Forrest, you acknowledge that. And I also spoke to Mr. Dickerson. He acknowledged that. I spoke to Tom Reese, and I appreciate when you're asked to find the very best way to flood the project, then of course he's going to come up with the best way to flood it without having to, you know, by identifying and doing the right way to flood it. But we don't need to flood it. We just don't need that. So they're saying the 10 to 15 acres of highly disturbed habitat, which is because it was neglected. The bioreduction. Now, since they've been collecting data, the bioreduction has already been, it's been reduced, because I go out there multiple times. I hike, I bike, I bring the scouts out there. We bring groups of women or men or whoever wants to go out there. I will drop at the dime and go and take somebody to the park. We just brought the mayor there, so this place is, or things like that, but it's because it was neglected. We started our neighborhood association to deal with that. That is one of our sole purposes. And then COVID hit. We had a massive cleanup schedule with Keep Tampa Bay Beautiful, because we had it scheduled with our whole neighborhood. We have the Chief Petty Officers Association. We went in there, just my bare hands, and we took out tons of material. The homeless were in there, and I didn't want to bring the city involved, because I knew once the government got involved, then our park was lost. And that's what we're doing. We're losing our park. We're losing our park, and it's beautiful, and we don't need to flood it. We don't need to carry people's water. There's another way. There's all since they haven't done anything. So the next point is they want to re-engineer an existing culvert system, but not by flooding 15 acres and taking out 15 acres of trees and habitat and vegetation. We don't need to take 15 acres. I mean, it's hard enough to get an oak tree cut down in your own yard, and they want to take out 15 acres. I don't, sorry. So then they're also mentioning FTC approval for removal of native trees. I don't know why. That's on South MacDill 48. I don't know why they want to remove native trees. the flooding pond, a flooding pond, meandering flooding pond, that's not native to this property. What's native to the property is leaving it alone and just doing the regular control that should have been done. Our whole neighborhood association was signed up to remove the potato plants. We were signed up to remove the debris. I personally removed probably, I don't know, several tons of stuff from the property. Me and our association and the Chief Petty Officers Association with the United States Navy at CENTCOM, they were signed up to protect the park, and we were working together to bring it together as a community project. That was our project until COVID hit and shut down our April, I believe it was April 5th group community project. So they're talking now, let's see, back to the proposed report that they want to do. Talking about the large oaks, there's not that many large oaks. Well, there is an oak that takes about probably 5 of my arms to hug. It's a beautiful tree, and there's more like it. So there are a lot of those oaks in there, and they're just gorgeous. They're beautiful. He showed pictures of the dead grass and palmetto. A lot of those palmettos weren't dead until recently, because I go back there, I've got pictures from years. So whatever they've been doing to kill off, they've already been working on it during their surveying. They've killed a lot of the Brazilian peppers. And the hammock that he showed, I call that the MacDill hammock. It's just a beautiful little hammock. Yes, they're Brazilian peppers, but it's still beautiful. And taking them out, if that's what we need to do, we would do it, because that was what our association, in conjunction with the MacDill Air Force Base Chief Petty Officers Naval Association and our scouts, were all going to do as a community. This is our community park. And so discarded tires, he mentioned, discarded tires and invasive non-species, the fern. And we discussed that, Tom and I discussed the fern, and we decided that it's just so beautiful. And there's a big grand oak in the middle of it, or I don't know the difference between grand, but it is huge. And it's my profile picture on my Facebook page. The fern garden is just, it's beautiful. And there's some oaks that pop out from it. It's one of the most beautiful places in the site. And Tom, he mentions I've been out there 5 times. Well, I've been out there 5 times, 50 times. I am out there a lot. I bring a lot of people out there. I introduce it to everybody that I can, until COVID hit. Of course, like I said, that just kind of messed it up. So again, the cleanup, we've done a ton of cleanup. The lightning strikes. Oh, it's so fatal. If we have a lightning strike, the world is going to end. Well, that's been that way for the past several decades. So it doesn't change from a half a year ago versus now. That's always been there. And we, again, we're taking on that project for ourselves to keep this property from being manhandled by man-hands. The major drainage ditch she's showing, and secondary drainage ditches, those ditches are there. They're huge. And all the rain we just had, they're not holding the water. There's not enough water to be held in that ditch. The smaller one has not been dredged. It hasn't been touched. There's caved in spots that they just neglected. And that's not my fault. It's not the forest's fault. It's not ELAPP 48's fault. That's the fault of the city who didn't maintain it. So there's major drainage ditches in there, and they could certainly figure out a way, they're engineers, rather than taking everybody's stormwater into our small, beautiful preserve and ruining it. So, I mean, yes, the way they would ruin it would be beautiful. They said, okay, we're going to ruin it, but it's not going to be ruined as bad as they were going to do it, but it's still going to be ruined by man touching it and messing with the natural part of the property. So, potato coverings, again, our community projects, what we foresaw, what we had in our neighborhood association as we started was to work to keep Tampa Bay beautiful, is clearing out the invasive species, making sure the tortoises there's many in there, more than they thought were in there. And the ones they've identified, I've identified more because I'm out there all the time. So, so we just need to, what?
May I interrupt you, please?
Sure. Sorry.
I would like, I do appreciate your sincere interest in this project. And I would like to make a couple of observations. With the city proposing this, it will have to go in front of city council to be funded. So you know you're going to get to make the city council at some point when if this project moves forward. And it would certainly be your good efforts to suggest to the city that you all as volunteers would like to participate in whatever is done. Tom, she commented about trees being taken down. Do you have an estimate of the number of large oak trees that you will be taking down?
Not at this point. We wanted to get in front of you as soon as possible. Right now, Atkins' team and their biologists are doing a survey that's approved by the city arborist, a method to count the number of trees that within the footprint. And so we don't have that number yet. I really don't have that information.
Okay, thank you. If the project were determined that it would move forward and go in front of the city council, they always could say, no, we can't do this because of the cost. So there is a possibility that it may not happen. So what I would like to do now is to say that we have a meeting in March. It would be appropriate, I believe, for us to bring this back in March to hear any of the changes Tom and Mr. and Aho have. Also, to have Jean come back and maybe work in with you all to see how this thing is going to progress, and then bring it back to ELAPP at our March meeting so we can see where it is. So if that would be agreeable to the board, I think that that's probably the way to proceed here, because for us to take a position now, when some of the questions that Jean has raised and those of us on the board have, Tom, you'll be better able to answer those, and particularly her concern about the trees, and then the concern about the gopher tortoises and any other wildlife. So I would think that with just a general show of hands, from the general committee, can we bring this back in March and get an update on it before we take any action? And Forrest, we don't really know what action you think is appropriate for us. Hold still, James, stay there.
Jan? I think that's appropriate. I mean, you could approve the concept today and then ask the consultant to come back in March. It just depends on how definitive you want to be with that today, based upon the information.
Jan?
Yes, who's speaking to me?
Sorry, this is Kurt Grimley.
Hey, Kurt Grimley.
Hi there. A couple of factual situations I want to relay to the committee. If I can share this real quick. If I can. Come on, share. This is a page out. Can you see this typed text?
Yes.
Okay. If you look at, this is a page from the grant award agreement that the city executed with the Florida Communities Trust. Item 8. A stormwater management plan will be implemented on the project site in conjunction with the Southwest Florida Water Management District to improve the quality of water entering Hillsborough Bay. The program shall include re-engineering the culvert system to rehydrate the wetlands on the site. Stormwater management facilities located on the project site shall be designed in a manner to provide recreational open space or wildlife habitat. That kind of sets the guideline. Item 2, when we had our interlocal agreement with the city, it requires that we approve any changes to the management plan so that we have to buy, basically what is finally presented to us has to be approved. And I'm trying to find, how do I open up?
Do you mean approved by the Board of County Commissioners?
No, it needs to be approved by staff, and depending upon the nature of changes, it may need to go to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm trying to stop sharing and I can't seem to find it. But that's all I have for now.
Okay, so, well, then I think it would be appropriate, based on what the written document you showed us, if there's a member of the general committee who would like to make a motion to approve this conceptually and forward it to our March meeting, I would appreciate that.
Jacqueline.
Don't approve it. It says to revamp it, to make a whole new system. It says to revamp the old.
Jan, can we stop public comment?
Wait a minute, I'm getting a whole lot of interference, so can we, everybody mute, and then who is, Jack, you were speaking?
Yeah, I think our purview here, I think Jane's argument is with the city of Tampa, not with ELAPP. Our job is just to make sure that whatever is proposed to us meets the standards of ELAPP. The citizens of Tampa, the city of...
I'm sorry, Jack, can you have Sally mute her mic, please?
Whose mic is open?
Miss Sally.
Sally, can you mute?
So I thought it was. Keeps changing, sorry.
Anyway, I would move this does meet our criteria, and we should basically approve this in concept so they can go forward. And then I think the rest of the battles are between the city council and their citizens. This is not the place for us. We're not supposed to be arguing anything other than whether what they're proposing for stormwater meets ELAPP standards or not. This is not our argument.
Would you clarify your motion?
I propose that we accept their conceptual presentation pending their final plans for our final approval. Of course, is that what you're looking for?
Yes. And I would like to forward the motion, include in the motion that the city and Tom and the public will come back to the meeting at our regular annual meeting in March. Okay? Now, who's off? Now my mic off?
Yeah, we hear you.
You hear me? Okay. So is there a second to Jack's motion?
Hi, this is Megan. I'll second Jack's motion.
Was that Megan? Are you here?
Yes, I'm here. I just have my camera off.
Okay, so it's Jack's motion, seconded by Megan. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. Raise your hands. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Jean, you will stay in touch with Forrest and the city on this. You and Russ, if you wish to come back to the meeting in March, see if there's any further clarifications that satisfy your neighborhood. Otherwise, Jack is absolutely right. It's the city's issue at that point.
So let's pass the buck. It's the government versus we, the people. Thank you. I'm sorry.
ELAPP, the members of the general committee are not elected by anybody in the city or in the county or the other cities. We're all volunteers to serve on this program. So we can't make any decision for you or for anyone for that matter. We can only forward our thoughts and recommendations to the appropriate agencies and local governments.
And that was to move forward.
Yes,
So,
to accept let's put it this way, the concept does not cause any issues as far as ELAPP is concerned. We're trying to meet any stormwater requirements. And Paul, you're muted.
Okay, I would just like to say that we have accepted stormwaters on other projects because we recognize that they are very useful in hydrating wetlands and providing cleansing of waters that otherwise would enter our bay systems untreated. So this is not new ground for ELAPP. This is something we've done before, and it's something that we think is a very valid use of our properties. So that's part of it.
Thank you. And we do know that many ELAPP lands provide tremendous amounts of stormwater maintenance for the county. It was in the millions of dollars worth. So the issue has been for us before. So I appreciate it, Jean. We will, you and Russ, your names are on the sign-in sheet. We'll make sure you get the information for the meeting when it's scheduled in March. And thank you very much for your participation. So we're going to move ahead and quickly, Kurt, can you do number 5 real fast?
Sure. Just a moment, please.
First is the 2019 ELAPP annual report.
I'll give you the Cliff Note version. Let me get to the start. Okay. We've been very successful this past few months. Can all of you see the map?
Yes.
Okay. Over here, my cursor, that is the double screen property. We last month closed on that. That's at a cost of $6,642,000 for 251 acres. Then right next to it, within a couple days of that closing, we acquired the CB Groves parcel, approximately 287 acres at a cost of $4,960,000. Now, Double Screen Associates also owns a large tract of land that could be added to this site if they are willing to include it in the ELAPP program. They were pleased with how the transaction occurred, and we will be approaching them to do just that in the very near future. We are also in communication with the current owner of the former Clearwater property up here that's outlined in yellow, and we're looking at various options. They do not want to pursue anything at this time because they are in the process of reclaiming the area where there was some lead contamination from ski range activities. So they're working on that reclamation, and when they get further along with that, we will be in discussions. We also closed on several parcels in the Rocky Brushy Creek project. The ones with black cross hatching, the Hockman parcels, which are parcels 111 and 112, 5.7 acres was acquired for $1 million. And then the Billingsley property to the south was acquired for $614,000. We are looking at the potential of putting these properties into the Florida Communities Trust in their current funding application cycle. I can tell you that parcel 113 has a price that's about double what we could support with appraisals, so we've terminated negotiations, but we are still reaching out to parcel owners of 108 and 109. The area to the green to the south was acquired in the 2000s and received 50% funding from Florida Communities Trust, most of it, not the one with the crosshatch. And the two properties kind of look like this. These areas west of the trail are an acquisition of convenience, but we may be looking at other public uses of these lands. We are still in negotiations on the Holmberg property, which lies between the Bomboilet Scrub Preserve and the Pringle Branch Preserve next to the reservoir. You can see a little piece of the reservoir up here in the corner. Mr. Holmberg wants continued use of a portion of this, primarily the green crosshatch, We've worked out the potential of him having a life estate on that, so that we know at one, and he is in excess of 80 years old, so that 1 year we will have full control over this. He currently has a business of with nursery facilities out there. We are still in discussions on the Greenpoint property in Triple Creek. We don't know if we're going to be able to get an appraisals at investment value that support their latest price, but we will try. We're still in discussions with Tampa Bay Water. This is more formulating what was presented to the General Committee some time ago, but we know that key parties with Tampa Bay Water are leaving, so we want to get this contract established before that happens. Now, we also want to bring to your attention a new acquisition that came on since our last meeting, and that is ELAPP is participating in the AgMart acquisition. This is a little unique. This AgMart is this green area here, and then there's this other portion of AgMart that's owned in blue over here. This acquisition is actually in conjunction with settlement of litigation, because the owner filed a Burt Harris claim against the county. ELAPP is acquiring this 470-acre portion approximately for $24 million. It was under the premise that it was approved for an RP2 development, which would have been 2 units to the acre. And Public Water Resources is funding the portion in blue. So that is going to the board Wednesday. And while it is expensive, it's being shown on this because this area right now is row crop area, but Forest objective is to restore this over the next couple decades to provide a connection to the Balm Preserve, which we hope to eventually connect down to the Little Manatee River corridor down at the south end, so that it connects to the Bomboyette Scrub Preserve up through Triple Creek, and hopefully with the Holmberg property here to the Pringle Preserve that's over here by the reservoir. So that there's a connection here that doesn't currently exist.
Nice.
We've been busy.
So
Court, you have been very busy. Thank you.
I have a copy of the acquisitions and who paid what and how much they cost.
That'll be coming out with the annual report. I'll get you a summary of that, of what's happened so far this year, Jan.
Okay, thank you.
We'll be coming out with the next annual report. I'm behind schedule on last year's annual report because I've been a little busy buying land. Plus, last year's annual report was a little different in that every single map had to be updated because of the complete re-ranking.
Well, we appreciate all the work you do to make these things happen. I just like to keep track of it in case I frequently have questions from people that I meet around the county and want to know what we paid for something, how many acres it is. So when you can just send me a summary of that, I appreciate it.
I'll send you a summary of what's happened up until October 1st.
Okay, thank you very much. Number 6, land management, Ross. Oh, Ann, did you have a question?
I did. I just was wondering, this is a lot of money we're spending, which is great. Good job, Kurt. But I'm just wondering, how are we doing in our budget?
Well, after the current after the AgMart transaction and what we've done to date, we'll have about $25 million left out of the $61 million. I will tell you, though, based upon some of these other properties that we're looking at, there's a good likelihood that in about a year we could be out of money. But we're supposed to do that because there was representations to Bonnie Wise and the board that we would spend this money within 3 years, and we just passed. We're at about a year and a quarter, year and a half right now.
Does that answer your question? You okay?
I'm pretty sure that Jan will go get go to the county commission, get us as much money as we need.
I know Bonnie well. Served with her in a couple different places, and I'll keep my fingers crossed. Michael?
I just wanted to say that I think building a little wildlife area corridor is so important, especially in the south part of the county. And I really kudos to everybody responsible. I think it's terrific.
Yeah, South County right now can't afford any development as things are looking, no roads, no schools. So if there are no more questions on the ELAPP financial acquisition update from Kirk, I'll move down to land management from Ross.
Okay, and I will keep it very
Our
short.
celebrity.
That's right. You can find me on all the local news stations. All right. So can you all see my screen?
Harold, yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so
I'm in a meeting.
so I'll keep it quick. Since I just updated it since our last meeting in June, so we've burned a little over 1,600 acres, which is pretty amazing considering all the rain that we have, and the prescribed burn programs across the state of Florida were shut down due to COVID-19 being a respiratory illness and everybody being stuck at home. There were a few months there that we weren't allowed to set fire at all. So our team is trying to catch up now. Our grants are still exactly the same from the last meeting. We had 2 really big grants from the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. And then we're working on the one from the Restore Act at Cockroach Bay. And I won't go through all of these, but I've added all of the projects that we're going to be working on for the next fiscal year and those that are still active. And the big number is actually what I'd like to show everybody. So over the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to be restoring almost 5,000 acres of land or doing environmental enhancement, invasive species control, stuff like that, at a cost of almost $12 million. So we are out there spending money on these restoration projects and working towards making these sites more ecologically functional. Public access, we've also been busy. We've added ADA parking pads at several of our sites. This is due to code requirements and also our desire to make our sites more inclusive for people to come out. And Chris will be talking about what he's been working on with the Alliance for Persons with Disabilities to make these sites more not accessible to people, but have some options out there for people to come see our sites. And Apollo Beach, I'm sure you've all seen. We've added a shell path, a hiking trail, and what everybody wants to come see is the new observation tower, which lets you see City of St. Pete, downtown Tampa, and not the Skyway, which I thought it would, but you can walk out to the edge of the beach on the shell path and see the Skyway from Apollo Beach. And then there's all the fencing, a little over a mile of fencing we've done over 2020. And that's all I got.
Thank you very much, Ross. I hope you all got to see him on channel 13 the other day. Was it 13?
It was, yep, Fox 13.
Yes, he did a wonderful job and represented ELAPP and the beautiful work down there at Apollo Beach. Mr. Chris Kitty, boy, you've sat for a long time. Like to give us your report, please.
I'll make this quick too. It's been a challenging time for outreach since most of our outreach design is, in-person programming. But we've gotten creative in the last few months and we've started creating virtual tours and self-guided programs. And in the last 3 months, we've actually had 1,018 people view our virtual tours and self-guided programs. So we're really excited about that. Ross also mentioned the ADA project. They built those pads at our sites, and after we got those pads down, we're thinking, now these pads are here, what are we going to do now? What kind of experience is somebody with a disability going to have coming to our site? And we wanted to get ideas, so I actually reached out to our liaison in the county for ADA stuff, and she set me up and got me the presenting for the Tampa Mayor's Alliance for Persons with Disabilities. I got to present to them and kind of show them the project, and basically reach out to them and ask for their help and guidance in a way to create impactful experiences for more people on our sites. So we've been working the last month or so talking about those pads and what we can do to create more impactful experiences for everybody on our sites. And the conversations are going really well. We actually have a meeting Thursday where we're going to go out to one of the sites with a pad, look at the gate system, and talk about what else we can do on those sites. So I'm expecting some really, really cool developments over the next few months in that regard. Ross mentioned, we saw that he was on Channel 13. We've gotten a lot of media exposure over the last few months. We're finding that a lot of people are going and visiting our sites and, getting out of their houses for their own mental health. I'm looking for things to do, and that's gotten the media reaching out to us and asking for stories. In the last 4 months, we have done 7 or 8 interviews with local media, and we've reached an audience of 2,133,000 people. And the county has valued that exposure at $620,000 for our department. So we're really proud of that. Like I said, we haven't been able to do our in-person outreach, but to reach that many people over these few months and introduce them to the Conservation Environmental Land Management Department and ELAPP has been really exciting, and we're really, really proud of that. Last, we have our 2021 hiking spree getting ready to start here in November, so keep your eyes out for that. We're really excited. I think we're going into our 5th year of the hiking spree. We've also got Charlie Belcher, I think, signed up, and he will be doing the hiking spree, it looks like, and promoting the hiking spree for us by actually going out and doing hikes with us. So I expect this will be one of the biggest hiking sprees we've ever done. So we're really excited about that. And with that, that's all I got.
I want to ask you a question. How many of our ELAPP sites, or where the access is to the ELAPP site, are perhaps on a HART bus line where you could work with the ADA to get to the parks?
So I don't have that number in front of me, but that is actually one of the things we're going to be looking at, and that's identified in our master plan as well, I believe, is making our sites more accessible by public transportation.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you.
And Jan, just to add to that, we're working on a survey with the University of Florida right now too, and they're going to be coming down to survey the community and let us know why they can't come to our sites, whether it be they can't spend the $2 at a conservation park, whether they can't get there because there's no public transportation. We're trying to figure out all of those obstacles for people to get to our site so we can try to resolve them. And then also one thing that Chris forgot to mention about the hiking spree this year is the state parks see how much exposure we get from the hiking spree, and they want to join us as well. So they're going to be worked into the hiking spree this upcoming year.
Yeah, we've actually partnered with the state park, so they'll be included in this promotion. So really good to develop that partnership.
And Chris, since you come to the Friends of the Parks meetings now, you can report this to that group and we can see how we can interact if appropriate.
Definitely.
Thank you. All right. There's a lot of you have sat here all afternoon and listened, and I know your ears hurt. Do any of you have any comments you would like to make before we disband? Ann?
Hi, I have sort of 3 announcements and then a question. One is that due to the coronavirus, the Florida Birding and Nature Festival was postponed this year, but it'll be next year after we all have the vaccine in October 2021, this last weekend, but next year. And then the other thing is Manatee County is putting a ballot initiative to have the voters support an ELAPP-like project in Manatee County. And I just think that's great. And we all should be excited about the fact that that's going forward on the ballot in Manatee County. And then Pasco County apparently just got a 1,000-acre donation in the Cypress Creek watershed. So I guess it was actually the water management got the donation, but it's in Pasco County. So I just wanted to tell everybody about that because I hadn't heard about that except for at a meeting that I was just recently, and Sally was there too. And then I had a question to Russ with regard to the Schultz parking area and the port impacts. Has that been resolved?
It has, yes.
How?
Do you want him to expand on that, Ann?
Well, so an email was sent out to everybody, is my understanding, and they were not found to be in violation of anything, and they're going to help us replant that bank.
Okay.
With the species that Mary recommended.
Great. Okay.
Okay, anyone else wish to make any comments? Thank you, everyone. I know this is a challenge, and I hope maybe by March we can actually meet in person. If we had that whole big room, we ought to be able to socially distance and wear our masks or not, as the case may be. If Anna's got some kind of pre-information as to when the vaccine's out. But at any rate, I appreciate you all dealing with this. And as soon as we have a couple dates to look at for our March meeting, we'll be back in touch with everyone. If there's no other business, Jack, did you have something? Russ, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was a little bit late to the meeting. I'm sure you had mentioned Kent Bailey. Would it be possible to scout sites to potentially rename a site in his honor?
We're going to work with Forrest on that, and Mike knew, and see what we can come up with. I just know he was so thrilled about getting the Cone Ranch. If there's some kind of a trail or something out there, I think he would have really been thrilled with that. But Forrest will come up with some recommendations, and as soon as he has them, he'll bring them to the general committee.
Wonderful.
And so you'll stay in touch, right?
Oh yeah, this is I think my third or fourth meeting, so I'll be on the official committee.
You'll be on the official list. Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry we've run such overtime, but I think we had a great meeting. Everybody wave goodbye. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.